What's up, Dragon Brood? As you can see, I'm not actually in my normal studio. Bland wall behind me. Weird that they don't have more artwork than just that thing. But we are at Magic 30, and I'm going to be bringing you other stuff throughout the weekend from there. But today, we're going to be talking about Brothers War previews because there's a bunch of cool stuff that just came out, and we need to talk about it. So let's get right into it. Alright, next up we have Felden, Ronin Excavator. It's a colorless and a red for a 2/2. Legendary creature, human artificer. He has haste and he can't be blocked, which is actually really interesting. Whenever Felden is dealt damage, exile that many cards from the top of your library. Choose one of them. Until end of your next turn, you may play that card. So this is actually really peculiar. It's a 2/2 for 2 with haste, which, okay, cool. Might actually fit some different decks. Can't be block or can't block. Okay, that makes more sense. I thought I read that wrong. Yeah, that makes way more sense. He actually can't block, not that he can't be blocked. But whenever he's dealt damage, you exile that many cards. That's actually potentially very big. Mostly because the fact that he can't block means you can't stop your opponent's like 5/5 and then draw 5 cards. However, when you're attacking, your opponent has to decide, okay, do I trade with this? Do I block it with just a 2/2, a 1/1? Or do I just take the 2? And they're punished for blocking, which is kind of interesting. I don't think we see this all that often. So I'm actually kind of on board with this card. It's a bit random, but could be a really cool card for those mono red or Gruul aggro decks. Next up is Blast Zone. Blast Zone enters the battlefield with a charge counter on it. You can tap it for a colorless. You can pay XX and tap it, put X charge counters on Blast Zone, and then you can pay 3 and tap it and sacrifice it to destroy each non-land permanent with mana value equal to the number of charge counters on Blast Zone. Yeah, this is just a good, useful card. Now, admittedly, it's another sweeper of some variety, which is kind of annoying that we keep getting more and more of these. But, you know, I'm not upset when there's like one per set, but when we've had multiples per set, it does get a bit old. Now, will this get played? I would think so. It's just a matter of what the format ends up looking like. What do the decks, the metagame, end up being, right? But this actually goes into a lot of different decks. There's a few that may be pushing colorless mana or artifacts depending on what the rest of the set brings. So I would keep an eye on this as something that will get played. Monastery Swift Spear. It's a 1 red, 1/2, haste, prowess. Whenever you cast a spell, you put a +1/+1 counter on this. And it's a human monk. Now, this one surprises me a little bit because I feel like we've had some other reprints of Monastery Swift Spear recently. Not necessarily in a standard booster, but, you know. And I don't know. I guess I'd feel a little weird if I bought one of those others to get like some special art one and then they just reprinted this. That being said, this is again another quality card for the mono red decks, for the red blue decks. Like, this is definitely right up the alley. And we're not even surprised we see this card because this is basically the same thing they set us up with on Jaya from the last set. So yeah, not a lot to say about this card. We already know it's a reprint, it's good, it's playable, expect to see a lot of it. Alright, Teferi, Temporal Pilgrim. It's a 3 colorless, blue, legendary planeswalker, no surprise. 4 loyalty. When you draw a card, put a loyalty counter on Teferi. Well, that's going to be fun now. You can pay 0, draw a card. Effectively +1, draw a card. -2, create a 2/2 blue spirit creature token with vigilance, and whenever you draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. Okay, I have something to say about that in a second. -12, target opponent chooses a permanent they control and returns it to the owner's hand. Then they shuffle each non-land permanent they control into its owner's library. Okay, there's a lot going on here. One, this feels ridiculous, right? It's just draw a card and then it just protects itself, sort of. But even if you don't, the -2 is really good on this. To get a 2/2 creature with vigilance, which is kind of awesome. Now, admittedly, it doesn't fly, which is peculiar because I expected it to say flying. Why it has vigilance, I don't know. But whenever you draw a card, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on this creature, where you're probably going to be playing other stuff that draws cards anyway, because you're going to be playing some type of blue-based control or slow deck of some variety. So this is actually really good. Now, for the -12, it's a little awkward. Target opponent chooses a permanent they control and returns it to its owner's hand. So they pick a thing and return it. Then they shuffle each non-land permanent they control into its owner's hand. Or into the owner's library. So they get to keep a card returned to their hand, everything else gets shuffled in, is basically what this says. That's huge. You know, this is the type of the ultimates that we've kind of gotten away from printing, and it felt pretty good, you know, that the others did big things but weren't necessarily game enders. This feels like it's probably a game ender, right? Because you're already not playing this Teferi until turn 5 and beyond, probably to try to protect it or kill something so it doesn't target it in some way. Then you're going to make, you may not even make the 2/2s, right? You might just be plussing to draw cards. And the reality is you might get to the -12 fairly fast. We have multiple things that draw 2-3 cards right now. We even have an X-Spell that draws cards. So it's not unreal to believe you could get to 12 in a turn, maybe 2, depending on what the board state looks like after you play this. And then the game's just kind of over, unless your opponent specifically has a way to kill Teferi. I'm not down with that. So hopefully I'm wrong, but man, this feels like it might be a bit of a menace. All right, then we have Urza, Prince of Krug. He's a 2 colorless, blue-white, 2/3 human artificer. Artifacts you control get +2/+2. Artifact creatures, I should say. It's very specific. A random non-creature artifact getting bonuses would be silly. 6 colorless, you create a token that's a copy of target artifact you control, except it's a 1/1 soldier creature in addition to its other types. So basically, if you had just random artifact, you can pay 6, you make a copy of that artifact, but it's also a 1/1 creature. This has a lot of potential. Now, how good it is, again, depends on the things that come out in this set, because I'm assuming we're going to get a lot of artifacts. If we do, this could have a very big payoff. Even more so if some of those artifacts generate mana, because then it's going to be pretty easy to keep paying the 6 to keep making copies and turn stuff in artifacts, and so on, right? This is actually a pretty sweet card. I'm on board with this. Like, not what I expected Urza to look like, but I'm not upset about it either. Since we have Urza and it's a Brothers War, we've got Mishra, Tamer of Makfawa. 3 colorless, black-red, 4/4. Human Artificer, legendary, obviously. Permanents you control have Ward, sack a permanent. Oh, that's powerful. Each artifact in your graveyard has Unearth, colorless, black, red. So this means you can play them out of the graveyard for that cost, which is actually pretty sicko. And if your opponent wants to kill one of your things, not even just kill one of your artifacts, kill one of your permanents, they have to sacrifice a permanent. This means even if they wanted to kill Urza, they would have to sacrifice something to be able to kill it. This is strong. This is real strong. Now, it does cost 5, but, you know, it is a 4/4, so that's not the worst thing either. And it comes in with Ward, so it can technically defend itself or at least make your opponent's life difficult. Now, the other side of this is if your opponent's playing something like some tokens deck or sacrifice deck or whatever, they're not going to be that bothered all that much by having to sacrifice a thing. But outside of those decks, this is a really, really cool ability. Something we hadn't seen before, which I also really like. Alright, splitting the Power Stone, 2 colorless and a blue for a sorcery. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice an artifact. You create two tapped Power Stone tokens. If the sacrificed artifact was legendary, you also draw a card. Power Stones are artifacts that tap at a colorless, but that mana can't be spent to cast non-artifact spells. Man, what's going on? Okay, so this is kind of interesting, right? You can take an artifact, sack it, then you get to break it effectively into 2 Power Stones. The Power Stones can only be spent to cast non-artifact spells. And I don't know, maybe this is just to keep things from looping or something else. It is a sorcery, so you kind of have to dedicate your turn to making this action happen. But it is almost kind of a ramp spell in blue of sorts. And it can actually draw a card if you're playing just legendary artifacts for whatever reason. Now, this card could sneakily find its way into other formats. I'm not sure which one just yet. But it could also be a fun addition for a commander, especially if you have some legendary artifact you kind of want in the graveyard that you can replay. So then you get a card and you get some other things to ramp your board, which is pretty sweet. But it is just an uncommon, so nothing super crazy here. but it's at least just an interesting card to discuss. Gix, Yawgmoth Predator, 1 colorless, black, Phyrexian Predator, legendary creature, 3/3. So not bad. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to one of your opponents, its controller may pay 1 life. If they do, they draw a card. 4 colorless, black, discard X cards. Exile the top X cards of target opponent's library. You may play lands and cast spells from among cards exiled this way without paying their casting cost. Ooh, okay. So this card's interesting. All right, so it's a 3/3 for 3, which isn't bad. You attack whenever it's just whenever a creature, not even this creature. So whenever a creature deals combat damage to any one of your opponents, the controller may pay 1. If they do, they draw a card. So the interesting thing here is it's actually not your creatures. It's just when a creature deals combat damage to one of your opponents. So this is actually in 1v1, it's just when your creatures hit your opponent. But in a commander game, then it becomes anytime somebody attacks. Like, you're actually encouraging people to attack your opponents and not you, so they could draw a card by paying 1 life. And then you can pay a bunch, discard a bunch, and exile cards, and you get to play those for free. So yeah, this card might be low-key good. Now, I will say, it does take 7 to activate its actual ability. But even if it's just, maybe over the course of the game, you get to pay 3 or 4 life to draw extra cards, that's still a very good benefit. I mean, Necropotence would probably still be played today if it were legal, and this is kind of the same thing, but attached to a 3/3 body. So yeah, I'm on board with this. Mishra, Excavation Prodigy. Oh, I guess we're telling the story of the brothers, and this is a younger version of Mishra. So 2 colorless and a red for a 2/1, has haste. You pay 1, discard a card, draw a card. Whenever you discard 1 or more artifact cards, add red. This ability triggers only once each turn. Okay, so if you want a way to ramp in your artifact-heavy decks, this is a cool addition. Nothing really exciting. Like, you either build the deck where this is part of it or not. So it's not like it's going to go into a pile of different builds, but it's actually will probably be pretty good in the one that it goes into. Then we have Herkel, Master Wizard, colorless blue for a 2/4. At the beginning of your end step, if you've cast a non-creature spell this turn, reveal the top 5 cards of your library. For each card type among non-creature spells you've cast, oh my goodness, this turn, you may put a card of that type from among the revealed cards into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Ooh, okay, so you get to the end of your turn. If you've cast a non-creature spell, you reveal the top 5 cards of your library. For each card you've cast that's not a non-creature spell, of the different types, you're talking about like artifact, enchantment, instant, sorcery, you can put a card of that type into your hand. So you could get up to, realistically right now, for technically 5, because you could maybe have cast a Planeswalker. But yeah, this is a neat upside card where you just get to cast things in a control deck, for instance, or some defensive deck, or honestly, even the mono blue decks that are floating around in Standard might dabble with this card and try it out, because there's a reasonable chance that you're going to get to keep putting extra instants and sorcerers in your hand. Yeah, once this thing gets rolling, could be a real problem. Urza, Prince of Krug, 2 colorless, blue-white, 2/3, Human Artificer. Actually, this is interesting that the other version of Mishra was uncommon and this one's rare. I wonder if we're going to get one of each at each rarity, but we'll see. We have Titania, Voice of Gaia, 1 colorless, green. So I guess we have one of these in every color. 3/4, legendary creature, elemental. It has reach, which is secret reach, because this does not look like it has reach. Maybe it's just because of trees or whatever. Whenever 1 or more land cards are put into your graveyard from anywhere, you gain 2 life. At the beginning of your upkeep, if there were 4 or more land cards in your graveyard, and you both own and control Titania, Voice of Gaia, and a land named Argoth, Sanctum of Nature, exile them, then meld them into Gaia, Titania Gaia Incarnate. All right, so this card's actually just really good, especially considering right now we have several lands that will just go to your graveyard. Now, they do search out other things and they gain you life, so you could be gaining 3 life each time that happens. But then we do have other stuff that still just destroys lands or whatever, and you could sacrifice those as well. And then if you get the 4 in the graveyard, you can try to set up for a big meld. So let's look at those other 2 cards. So the land is Argoth's Sanctum of Nature. Enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a legendary green creature, which is convenient because that's what Titania is. You tap and add a green, or you can pay 2 colorless green, tap it, create a 2/2 green bear creature token, then mill 3 cards. Activate only as a sorcery. Well, don't these 2 cards work hand in hand very well? You can just make creatures and put stuff in your graveyard, which is probably going to get you to 4 lands. So, as far as meld stuff goes, this is actually one of the better kind of interesting combos. Now, admittedly, this is only the second set we've done meld, but this one actually feels pretty cool. And here's the payoff for those. This has Vigilance, Reach, Trample, Haste, as it should. If you have to meld something, it should just have a ridiculous amount of abilities. It has Power and Toughness, each equal to the number of lands you control, which is interesting because you have to put lands in your graveyard to actually get it into play. When Titania enters the battlefield, return all land cards from your graveyard. Well, there you go, to the battlefield tap. Never mind. So all those things you worked on putting into the graveyard now come into play, and then that's super exciting. And then you can pay 3 and a green, put 4 +1/+1 counters on target land you control. It becomes a 0/0 elemental creature with haste. It's still a land. Wow, this is... Now, admittedly, you're probably only going to do this every so often, right? Even if you have 4 of each of the cards in your deck or whatever, this likely doesn't happen with that much frequency and doesn't always get to live, right? That's going to be the other issue. But yeah, I could already see a deck where I could put these cards in there. And honestly, we built one for the channel, the blue-green deck that was about lands and Slowkirk and all that stuff. Like, that would be perfect for this type of build. So yeah, already thinking. I know what one of the first early videos is going to be. Phyrexian Fleshgorger, 7 colorless. Wow, for a 7/5 menace lifelink. It has ward, pay life equal to Phyrexian. Oh my gosh, this card's power. So if you want to kill this, you have to, or at least target it, you have to pay 7 or more if it's bigger to be able to kill it. You have to block it otherwise, and it has menace. So you're going to give up probably 2 things to try and kill this, and it has lifelink, so they'll be getting life the whole time. But it has a new ability called Prototype, and Prototype says you may cast this spell with different mana cost, color, and size. It keeps its abilities and types. So you can also cast this for colorless black for a 3/3. This is very interesting. So early on, you can have a 3 mana 3/3 that has these abilities, or later in the game, you can have a 7/5 for 7 with these abilities. Here's something even more interesting about this card. This would mean that you could play it as a 3/3 for 3 early, right? But then if you have some type of effect that blinks it and removes it from play, it puts it back into play, it's going to come back as a 7/5. Yeah, this could actually lend itself to some really, really tough stuff. This is a cool card, honestly. I'm probably going to both play it and die to it quite a few times. But yeah, very interesting card overall. And no surprise, as we were all hoping, the Pain lands are back for the remaining cards. I believe there were 4 that got left out. So yeah, we're getting those in this set. No shocker. We expected these. Expect them to get a lot of play just like the other ones do. And then these next few cards were actually previewed, I don't know, like a month ago when they started talking about the set, but I figured I'd cover them here anyways, and this is the first preview video I'm doing on the channel. But Mishra, claimed by Gix, is 2 colorless, black-red, 3/5. Whenever you attack, each opponent loses X life, where you gain X life, where X is the number of attacking creatures. If Mishra, claimed by Gix, is a creature and a creature named Phyrexian Dragon Engine are attacking, and you own both and control them, exile them, then meld them into Mishra lost to Phyrexia. It enters the battlefield tapped and attacking. Phyrexian Dragon Engine is a 3 colorless 2/2 with double strike. When it enters the battlefield from your graveyard, you may discard your hand. If you do, draw 3 cards. It has Unearth of 3 red, which we've seen the other Mishra that also gives stuff Unearth for a colorless red and a black, so all of this kind of intertwines, which makes sense. But again, if these are attacking together, then you get this other thing, which is Mishra lost to Phyrexia. Phyrexian Artificer, legendary creature, 9/9. Whenever Mishra lost to Phyrexia enters the battlefield or attacks, choose 3. Now, since this will come right into play tapped and attacking, you get to choose the 3 of these things during this first attack step it comes into play. Target opponent discards 2 cards. Basically, you'd be able to empty their hand. Mishra deals 3 damage to any target. Alright, so you can deal 9. Destroy target artifact or planeswalker. Creatures you control gain menace and trample until end of turn. So makes it hard for your opponent to just block this and not get beat down. Creatures you don't control get -1/-1 until end of turn. So you could also give your opponent's board -3/-3. Create 2 tapped Power Stone tokens. Or if you need something that needs artifacts or artifacts to sacrifice, there you go. So yeah, your choice of 3 of these each time it comes into play or attacks, and all of these are actually pretty good. Well, I say that. We don't know how good the Power Stone thing is yet, but I assume since they're building around it in the set and it's mentioned on a bunch of cards, it's probably pretty solid. So yeah, the flexibility from this card and the potential to even just end the game, just being a 9/9 plus another 9 damage if you want it to be, is pretty big. So yeah, this is a cool Now, the one thing I like about this is each individual card is also very strong too, kind of like we saw with the green ones. So yeah, this I'm going to get hit at least once by this. Now to the other side of that, we have Urza, Lord Protector, colorless, blue, white, 2/4, human artificer. Artifact, instant, and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Easy enough. You can pay 7 if you both own and control Urza, Lord Protector, and an artifact named the Might Stone and Weak Stone. Exile them, then meld them into Urza Planeswalker. Activate only as a sorcery. So this is a little bit different because you have to commit to this during your main phase, and it costs 7. However, I don't know, I guess technically you could use Power Stones you've been building up to make it possible. But let's take a look at what the Might Stone and Weak Stone is. The Might Stone and Weak Stone is a 5 colorless legendary artifact that happens to also be a Power Stone. When the Might Stone and Weak Stone enters the battlefield, you choose 1. You either draw 2 cards, or target creature gets -5/-5 until end of turn. And then you can tap this to add 2 colorless. The mana can't be spent to cast non-artifact spells. This is actually pretty cool. Now the mana can't be spent to cast non-artifact spells, but it doesn't mean you can't use it to activate things. So that's actually pretty cool. And getting the option of drawing 2 cards or destroying something when it comes into play effectively, because -5 kills almost everything being played in standard at the moment. This is actually really strong. Honestly, even if you aren't doing the Urza thing, there's some decks that might still just play this. But in case you did want to do the Urza thing, Urza Planeswalker is a 7 loyalty legendary Planeswalker. Once during each turn, you may activate an additional loyalty ability of Urza. Okay, so I'm a little confused here because the wording of this says, once during each of your turns. Like, that's not normal wording for a Magic card. It's normal during each turn or during your turn, but not during each of your turns, plural. I mean, it's probably nothing. It's probably just a typo, but it just reads very weird. Then it says, pay or +2 artifact, instant, and sorcery spells you control you cast this turn cost 2 less to cast. You gain 2 life. +1, you draw 2 cards and discard a card. 0, you create 2 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature tokens. Or -10, artifacts and planeswalkers you control gain indestructible until end of turn. Destroy all non-land permanents. Yeah, so this is actually pretty strong. So you get to use at least 2 of these from the way it's worded every turn. And these are powerful abilities. I mean, drawing extra cards. Actually, draw 4 cards and discard cards. Or you get to make stuff just be cheaper and you gain life. You make it super cheap. You make a pile of blockers, exile permanents, or just plus for a couple of turns, and then you keep your Urza and possibly other planeswalkers and your artifacts, which is already going to be some, and then your opponent's board is gone. This is something. Yeah, this admittedly, meld cards should be powerful and be over the top because of so much work that goes into them. So I'm not upset about this. It's just, damn, if this happens, you got limited time. Queen Kayla Ben Krug, 1 colorless, red, white, 2/3, legendary creature, human noble. 4 colorless, tap it. Discard all the cards in your hand, then draw that many cards. You may choose an artifact or creature card with mana value 1 you discarded this way. Then do the same for artifacts or creature cards with mana value 2 and 3. Return those cards to the battlefield to activate only as a sorcery. This one's actually kind of quirky, right? Because while it has a powerful ability to be able to discard your hand and draw more cards, and you possibly get stuff into play, you kind of also have to build around it too to maximize it, right? Because otherwise, are you sitting on 1, 2, or 3 mana things on turn, up to turn 4 potentially on this, just to discard them and hope they come into play, right? And that's assuming that Queen Kayla actually survives. Now, I will say if it does, you almost can get into a cycle of discard things, draw things, some stuff comes into play. You discard things, you draw things, some comes into play. This is actually kind of fun, and I think this might be an even better commander card than it is a 60 card. But yeah, it's a cool build around anyway. Mishra's Foundry, tap for a colorless. Pay 2, turn it into a 2/2 assembly worker artifact creature until end of turn. It's still a land. Pay 1 colorless, tap it. Target attacking assembly worker gets +2/+2 until end of turn. I mean, if you're playing an artifact heavy deck or a deck that can utilize all the colorless mana, this is actually pretty good. It's a land, so it's hard to kill, and your other lands could pump your lands, which is neat. However, we've seen other versions of this, and we don't play with them all that much in various formats anymore. So not saying it can't still be useful, it very well can, just not as exciting as I think this card once was. Had it been previewed like, I don't know, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, I might have been a little higher on it, but as time has gone on, we've kind of gotten away from playing these in most formats. So I'm going to say still playable, but probably not going to be seen as much as you think. Though one thing to note is that for some monocolor aggro decks, it is possible that they could splash 2 or 3 of these potentially in lieu of having other creature base or man lands, if you will, to where you can still play things after sweepers happen and still get damage in without really hurting yourself too much. So in that regard, maybe it does show up in a couple other places. And alright, this is going to round things out for us with Surge Engine, 2 colorless, 3/2 defender. Pay a blue, Surge Engine loses defender and gains this creature can't be blocked. So you get a 3/2 unblockable. You can pay 2 colorless and a blue, and if it's already, oh no, it becomes a blue and has power and toughness. Oh, okay, interesting. This does not work like the others. So Surge Engine becomes blue instead of just being an artifact, and has base power and toughness, 5/4. Activate only if Surge Engine doesn't have defender. So obviously you've had to activate the first ability or done something else that took away defender. Then you can pay 4 blue, draw 3 cards. Activate only if Surge Engine is blue and only once. So you can't use this down the road. Once you use it once, it's used. Otherwise, that'd be great to be able to pay 6 and draw 3 every time. And you don't have to activate it as a sorcery, which is kind of nice either. So yeah, but a 2 mana 3/2, which is a quality blocker early, and then for 1 mana later, you have an unblockable creature. This is interesting to me because there could be aggressive decks built with this that actually could take advantage of it. I mean, you very quickly have a 5/4 unblockable creature, which isn't going to leave your opponent with a life total for very long. So yeah, I'm kind of into this. And I'm sure there's way more to this card you can do than I'm even thinking about right now after just reading it. Well, that's it, y'all. That's our first video from Magic 30 on location. Cool cards for Brothers War. There's going to be a lot more coming out throughout the weekend, so I'm going to try to keep up with those. But be sure to follow so you don't miss all these previews. That's all I have for you for now. We'll see you next time.